very dramatic.
Yes. Yeah, I really wish we would have blocked this front row off, though. I just don't want anybody sitting over my back.
Good luck, everybody.
Thanks.
Good evening. There we go. Good evening. Welcome to the Electoral Area Directors Debate. We are coming to you live from the Tidemark Theatre and the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce, along with the Campbell River Mere and the Tidemark Theatre Society, are the three co-hosts for all of the series of debates. My name is Mary Ruth Snyder. I'm the Executive Director for the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce. And I would just like to say we honor our relationship with the Lakota people, the Weewakai and the Weewakam, as well as other First Nations, Métis and Inuit, all who now reside in Campbell River and the Lakota territory. The introductions are coming right up. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Good evening, candidates, and thank you for joining us this evening. This is Democracy in Action. Now, we will begin alphabetically with your opening introductions, which will be 90 seconds. We will start with candidate Dahl.
Good evening. My name is Mark Dahl, and I'm running to represent Area C. To understand any candidate, one needs to know who they are, why they're running, and what they hope to accomplish. As to who I am, I'm a father of two amazing 13-year-old twin girls, a husband, a regenerative farmer of 40 acres on Quadra Island. I'm a volunteer firefighter and a person with a long commitment to volunteerism and community building, both here on Quadra and in Calgary, where I was born. In my life, I've been a teacher, I've been a realtor, a community leader, a longtime environmental educator, and an active participant or chair of numerous boards and committees. To begin, the communities of Area C are at a crossroads. Our communities are currently diverse and vibrant, with all ages and social economic backgrounds, but this is changing quickly. The housing crisis across the nation is especially severe in desirable areas such as ours. We deal not only with the lack of affordable housing, but with a significant proportion of our housing stock becoming not just unaffordable, but summer cottages or short-term rentals. We cherish the diversity of our communities, yet we have lost a significant percentage of our workforce in recent years, and our population is trending more and more towards a single age group. To remain a vibrant place to live for all ages, we're going to need to help those who currently are at the table. We need help from those currently at the table here tonight, coupled with a significant amount of community building work in our own communities. Putting my decades of board experience to work at the SRD table and my years of community building leadership to work in our communities to achieve these goals defines both why I'm running and what I hope to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, candidate Lee for Area D.
Thank you, Tidemark Theatre, for having me tonight. I'm Brenda Lee. I have lived and worked in Area D since I was first elected in 1993. I've raised two sons in my same home in Stories Beach, and now 30 years later, I'm still in the same location and still serving the people in Area D with the care and attention they have learned to expect from me. I have excellent leadership skills and I understand local government and how it works. My skills help me navigate a myriad of issues faced by local government, issues such as health, facilities, waste management, libraries, etc. We have 43 services, I believe, in the Strathcona district. I can adapt and work through the challenges presented to me and can deliver on community goals. Area D is in excellent financial shape because I don't believe in going into debt, so I try not to. And I have strong fiscal management, which allows me to keep our property taxes under control. This coming term, we're working towards improving our water systems in both Northern Area D and Oyster River. And I'll probably get more into that later, but we're drilling for deeper wells in the aquifer at Oyster River. And in the north, we're awaiting an announcement for a $2.4 million grant for universal water metering. The metering of our system in the north will ensure that consumption may be reduced by up to 50%. I'm also happy to be delivering flood protection and shoring up the Glenmore Dike and maintaining our area as a safe area to live. I have created several parks in our areas, such as Hagel, Maple, Oyster Bay Shoreline, Middle Notch, and Area D took over Oyster River Trails. We have several beautiful parks, and we've completed wildfire plans and evacuation routes. We have floodplain regulations to make sure people are safe building near the water. And we have an excellent fire department, fire rescue department at Oyster River.
Thank you, Candidate Lee.
Thank you.
And Candidate McWhinney.
Hello, I'm Robin Mawhinney. For 28 years, I've lived, worked, adventured, farmed, and volunteered on Quadra Island. Quadra Island is my home. The wild places, the friendly faces, and the Salish Sea are woven into my heart. I am deeply committed to the community and the land. Through volunteerism and a life lived in community, I've built deep relationships and forged many connections. I practice and I believe that collaboration yields better results. I've served the community for years. Highlights of this include serving on the board of the Quadra Island Children's Center, being one of the co-creators of the Quadra Island Fall Fair, and currently I'm a member of the Quadra Island Trails Committee, building and maintaining trails and bridges. Island values are central to my platform because they are my core beliefs. I want decisions centered on long-term sustainability, respect for First Nations, the strength of our community, and the rural nature that we all love. I've heard that community engagement is important, and as a director, I want to connect with the community for input. My vision includes a community advisory council with representatives from a range of areas across Area C and within Quadra itself. Community engagement extends to discussing critical topics at open house meetings and inviting digital input from folks who prefer to stay home while sharing their ideas. Housing is a critical issue on Quadra and broadly. Community engagement is key to finding alignment and making the many small shifts which can add up to significant change. My intention is to be a voice for the community, to advocate on important issues, and amplify community-driven projects.
Thank you, Candidate McWhinney.
It's actually Mawhinney.
Mawhinney.
Yes.
Mawhinney. And Candidate Rice.
Good evening. I moved here 8 years ago for a better lifestyle with my family. I had a job to come to, as well as my wife. My mother-in-law could be cared for in dignity living in our house, and there were opportunities for my children. We are living in unique times. Just look around. There are changes and they're coming fast. We have climate change, lack of housing, rising costs, just to name a few. As a resident who's been through 2 regional elections, I've gained some insight into the variety of issues here. I respect our rural lifestyle, and I wish to preserve it just like you do. Enough with partisan decisions. The community wants its voice back on all decision-making, and I respect that. Area D needs a director who understands how to embrace ever-changing technologies that are reshaping the future of our community. Progress and success in the area will require honest, positive, and effective leader, a thoughtful communicator with the skill to negotiate mutual beneficial partnerships while maintaining respectful relationships with First Nations and all our neighbors. That is transparency, and that has been missing far too long. It is for all these reasons that I've decided to put my name forward as the candidate for Area D. My name is John Rice, and and I'm here to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Candidate Vanesh.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Vanesh. I'm going to be the acclaimed regional director for Cortes Island. I have the luxury of not having to run against somebody. When I was invited to this debate, I questioned whether I should be here, but I thought, it's a chance to sort of meet all the other candidates and learn about the issues that everybody else cares about and start finding common ground to get work done. I grew up on a dairy farm in Olds, Alberta, learned the value of hard work really early. I went to school for business, got a major in finance, and almost became an investment banker until I discovered the West Coast and my love for filmmaking and community work. I've started an organization called Real Youth, which does mobile film production programs all across Canada. For the last 17 years, we've made 2,500 films and engaged communities to make films about issues they care about. I've sat on numerous nonprofit boards across the island. I'm a landowner. I built my house here. I have an 8-year-old son, and just really excited to step into this position and put my skills to work and make positive change happen in the Strathcona Regional District. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Candidate Wally.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerald Wally. I'm the Regional Director for Electoral Area A of the Strathcona Regional District. I've lived in Sayward for 45 years, and I've been honored to be Area A's Regional Director for the last 14 years. My wife and I own property on Frenchman's Road in the Sayward Valley. My commitment to my constituents is straightforward. I will work tirelessly to ensure our property taxes are as low as possible, and the envy of every other electoral area. Additionally, for all areas that do not want a formal community plan, such as the Sayward Valley, I will ensure that as long as I am director, there will be no zoning, no land use bylaws, no building permits, no building inspections, no business licenses, no dog license, no government interference in what people want to do in their own property. I believe that local government has no business dictating to people how they can use their own land. Area A is uniquely protected by the province from excessive residential development because most of Area A is either agricultural land reserve or tree farm license, on which the provincial government does not allow new subdivisions. One of the recent important projects that I've undertaken for Area A, which I expect will come to fruition very soon, is high-speed internet with unlimited download capacity. The hookup is absolutely free, and there's no obligation whatsoever to purchase the service for everybody who would like to have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Wally. There is a 7th candidate, Sarah Fowler, who is also running in Area A, and she has sent the following note. I am running for a candidate for Electoral Area A because I enjoy participating in democracy. I wish that I was able to attend tonight's debate at the Tidemark Theatre, but September 20th falls on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, and she has a long-standing commitment to attend the regular scheduled meeting of council for the Municipal Hall for TASIS. Her involvement in the community is long-standing and will continue regardless of election results in whatever capacity possible. Prior to being elected in the Village of TASIS Council in 2018, she was pleased to provide services as a lifeguard at the Community Recreation Center, among other things. In short, to serve is her hobby, and she considers it a great honor to represent everyone on your behalf. She goes on to say, I am prepared to serve because of the experience gained over the last 4 years in my first term. Somehow it felt much longer. I have taken every opportunity available to learn more about municipal government processes. Besides being acclaimed as a small community representative to the UBCM, Union of British Columbia Municipalities, Executive Board in 2020, and elected as Director at Large to the AVICC, Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, Executive in 2022. I have also been awarded the LGLA, Local Government Leadership Academy Level 1 certification, and furthermore, her extended background includes working as an administrator to the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration at the House of Commons when she was studying political science in Ottawa. Sarah, thank you for the message, and the entirety of her post will be put on our website for you to view. So now we move on to the first question, and as candidate Dahl went first for that, candidate Lee will go first for the first round of questions. And the first question is, what is your professional background and why do you feel that you would be a good candidate for your area? Candidate Lee.
Thank you. Well, I have served the community for 30 years in local government, so that is a lot of education. Prior to that, I have a bachelor's degree from Simon Fraser University in English and communications, and so I am a good communicator. And I actually took a 5th-year professional development program at SFU for teachers training, but I decided politics was so much easier than teaching. Ha ha ha. And I have raised children in my home. I've raised lots of other people in my home and got them launched. And I just feel that my background, and getting to my professional background, I worked in England for 7.5 years as a human resource administrator for a big marathon oil company, offshore oil. And I've worked at local industries, resource-based, such as when the pulp mill was going, I worked there. I worked as the manager's secretary at Western Mines when I was 19. I've been around, I've worked for lawyers, I've worked for different banking organizations in my professional career long before I became the director though. So the directorship is really what I've been spending most of my time on, and it is basically full-time for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidate Lee. The next candidate for that question is candidate Mawini. And do you need me to repeat the question?
Would you mind? That'd be great.
What is your professional background and why do you feel that you would be a good candidate for your area?
Thank you. My professional background is primarily in graphic design. And I believe that working as a graphic designer, I have had many opportunities for collaboration. In fact, collaboration is one of the best skills that I bring to the table because I want to make sure that people's visions are birthed in a way that gives them the best product that they can have. But as well as my professional experience, I think I'd like to mention that I have been really involved in the community for many years. I've worked, I helped to create and organize the Quadra Island Fall Fair for its many years of operation. And let me tell you, working with 100 volunteers or maybe more every year is definitely something that teaches you good collaboration and communication skills. As well, I have been on the Advisory Planning Commission and I have been on the board of the Quadra Island Children's Center, and currently I am building and maintaining trails and bridges with the Quadra Island Trails Committee. So I believe that when I took this, like when I began this process of becoming a candidate, it was really important to me to have a collaborative and communicative process. And I reached out to many of the First Nations who have traditional unceded lands that Area C is a construct placed upon, and have had the honor to meet with the Weewakai Chief and Council, as well as Chief of the Halko First Nation, and also Councillor Thomas Smith of the Tlawitsis First Nation. These conversations are ongoing, but I believe that it is a good start, and it shows that I am focused on collaboration and communication.
Thank you, candidate Mawini. Candidate Rice, would you like me to repeat the question?
No need, thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe I have a great background to do this kind of work. I've spent 30 years in technology and innovation. Throughout my career, I've worked as a technical trainer, a person who needs to go and find solutions for technical problems, and a fact finder. I think those are perfect skills for somebody going into politics. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Vinesh.
My professional background, I joke around that being the oldest of 6 kids got me into doing youth work. Growing up on the farm, spent a lot of time working with youth, and eventually started a business that has made my profession engaging marginalized young people, giving them film and leadership skills, and supporting them to produce media that represents their lived experiences and their visions for positive change. I love people. I think one of the things I've really tried to do with this campaign is speak to people that are different than me. I think it's one of the biggest things that politics is calling for nowadays. We have to break out of our silos and acknowledge that we're not going to agree on everything, but we have a lot of common ground. And with a commitment to working together, we can make some real progress. I'm a problem solver. One of my favorite things to do is face a challenge and try and find a solution to it that brings people together and brings the expertise in the room. I'm not going to pretend to be the politician with all the answers or know everything about everyone, but one of the skills I bring to the table is I can reach out across the aisle. I can connect with people that are different, and I think I can bring consensus and make progress on the issues that are facing Cortez, which I see as a microcosm for the district and even the province and the nation.
Thank you so much, candidate Vinesh. Candidate Wally.
For most of my professional career on the West Coast, I worked for McMillan Bodell. I was in forestry and looked after the silviculture. I was on staff there for almost 30 years. I have been a director for 14 years, so I'm very familiar with the way local government operates. I'm also a property owner in the Seward Valley. I have acreage here and horses. And that being the case, I can empathize with everyone else who is a property owner. And my whole philosophy is that government has no right to interfere in the enjoyment of our property and the use of our property in any way that we see fit. And that is the way that I will maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Wally. Candidate Dahl. Candidate Dahl.
We'll go back to the microphone. Am I coming through now?
Yes, it is. Go ahead. Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
So my professional background is kind of varied. I started my professional career as a teacher. I was a junior high teacher for 12 years. In that time, I was a wrestling coach and a debate coach, and that was that part of my life. And then I went from there to being a community realtor, and I spent 12 years doing that. And a few years ago, we left that lifestyle. My wife and I decided that the lifestyle that we were living, we didn't find to be sustainable or resilient. And we did what we call a 180-degree turn and set out to find a different way of living. And where that ended up was on a 40-acre farm here on Quadra Island, where we practice regenerative agriculture. So all those things and kind of weave together and allowed for a lot of different experiences. On the political end of things, when I was in the realtor phase of life, it allowed me a lot of time to really get involved in municipal politics in Calgary. And I was one of the original strategists and get out the vote coordinator for the mayor's first and second runs, Mayor Nahid Nedshi. I won the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award for my work as a community association president and community volunteer in Calgary for leadership roles that I took in that. And I think all those things again.
Thank you. Thank you, candidate Dahl. That 90 seconds goes quick.
It does.
And now we'll move on to the next question. And the first candidate to answer the next question is candidate Mawhinney. With the housing crisis that we are facing, not only across the country, but especially here on Vancouver Island, what would be your approach to moving the needle on the housing crisis in your area?
Thank you. The housing crisis is broad and definitely is affecting Area C and Quadra Island. I've spoken to many people who have concerns. I believe that to move the needle on the housing crisis is going to require a lot of community engagement to ensure that as a community we have alignment and know that a direction that we are choosing is going to be best for the majority of our community. I also really feel that the best way to approach the housing crisis here on Quadra Island and beyond is to find many small shifts which together can add up to significant change. I don't think that anybody here wants a major development or some large thing coming on in. So I think that while we're looking at this development or change that's coming, we really need to be mindful of long-term sustainability and being clear that water resources that we have on in our community will be adequate to serve any future additional homes that do get built here.
Thank you so much, candidate Mawhinney. Candidate Rice.
I think my mic's not, there we go. That's better. I think the issue over housing and lack of housing is very complex. I think the first step is to actually engage the community. What I hear in Area D is there's a lot of people that are interested, but then they're going, not in my backyard. So I think we need to change the dialogue on how we approach lack of housing. I think we can certainly look at our zoning and our bylaws and look at solutions that are not invasive, but simple solutions to increase the market. I also believe that it is a complex thing and it's going to take time, but it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Rice. Candidate Vanesh, what are your thoughts on the housing crisis?
Well, it's certainly the number one issue here. You know, everybody I talk to, it's maybe not every single person's number one, but across the political spectrum, housing's the number one issue. There's, you know, every business on Cortez is struggling to run at capacity right now because they don't have enough housing for their staff. I know seniors that lived in a tent last winter with a trailer for a kitchen. You know, looking at the recent housing survey that I helped work on and distribute here on Cortez, it's clear there's a lot of people living in housing that's not suitable either because of the cost or the amenities that it has, or crowding. It's an issue that everyone wants to make progress on, and it's also really complicated. And I don't think there's one thing that you can say this is going to solve the housing crisis. It's a mix of things. We need to look at, you know, affordable home ownership and raw land purchase for young people that are looking to live in our communities and add vibrancy and culture. We need to look at nonprofit, below market housing. We need to look at ways to support the older people in our community, the seniors, to be able to stay here and move into sort of seniors cluster housing and open up some of the larger homes for other housing opportunities. There's a lot of empty housing on Cortez. You know, I hear from a lot of folks that, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't using their housing, don't rent it, and are only here for a few weeks.
Thank you.
I think that's something we need to address. And, you know,
thank you, candidate Vanesh.
In order to make a difference, we're going to have to bring the province on board, and that's one of the things I'm really going to focus on.
Thank you. Candidate Wally, how would you address the housing crisis?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that a large extent of this problem is caused by municipalities and developers who are building unaffordable homes for a lot of people. In Area A, there is no opportunity in many parts of our area for subdivisions. What we have here, though, unique to Area A, is the opportunity to put trailers on your property for families that can't afford a single family home. Also, we have several trailer parks that have lots of vacancies for anyone who wants to do that. So we don't have the restrictions on trailer parks that most people do. So there's lots of opportunity in Area A for people to take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Dahl.
You're muted there, Mark.
I'll figure this technology out one of these days. I think when we look at the housing crisis, we need to, first of all, understand what it means to communities that we have in Area C. On Quadra Island, it's more than just not being able to find people to fill the jobs that are here. It's about our middle income seniors when they can no longer take care of their 5 and 10 acre properties. It's about them losing their ability to even live on Quadra. It's about our tenants. Now that we've had this huge increase in property values, tenants or property owners are selling their homes because it makes good sense, but the new owners aren't taking on new tenants or going to different models where it's easier to derive some income out of short-term housing. And we're losing so much of the character, so many of the people that are so much a part of our communities, we're losing them. So that's what it means, this housing crisis. It's not just about, not finding somebody to clean a floor or clean a bed. So it's very profound. It goes right to the essence of who we are and what we want to be as a community. So it's going to take a lot of work. And I think everybody here is talking about the one thing that I think is super important, and that is really engaging the community, because some of these changes are when you have big problems, you have to tackle them head on. This is a big problem. But to tackle it as a director and just saying, hey, here's the solution, we're not going to get the buy-in that's required to tackle this problem, because it really is going to define who we are as Quadra
Thank you,
Island,
candidate Dahl.
in Reed Island. I got to.
Thank you.
Sure, we don't have five minutes for question and answers. That'd be great.
And candidate Lee, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure, please.
With the housing crisis, what will be your approach to help alleviate it in your area?
Well, Area D of all the 4 electoral areas in Strathcona has the lightest problem with housing. There's much more demand on Quadra Cortez. We just had a Macola housing survey done for us, 200 or 300 pages, and suggesting that Area D had the least problem. And that's, I think, because our official community plan was visionary that we set, and we have moderate growth each year of about 2%. And there's a very big mix of housing types. So there's mobile homes, there's houses, small houses, big houses. There's a big mix of properties, there's farms. So people have choices here, although the market is very tight. Having said that, I don't believe local governments should be raising funding through local property taxes, because we simply do not have the ability to tax homeowners to provide houses for other people. I think the federal government needs to step up and provide some programs for low.
Thank you, candidate Lee.
Things like that for people. I don't think it's up to local government.
Okay, thank you. The next question, what role should the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital Board play to retain and protect Campbell River Hospital services? Candidate Rice?
What a tough question. I think there's a lot that, in terms of the role that can be played. I think the first thing is making sure that, go back to available housing, make sure that we do have housing so that we can encourage recruitment for all of the staff that are required. The other thing that I think that local government can be doing also is ensuring that it's the lifestyle that people want to come to. And I think those things will bring medical professionals and doctors and those items back. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Vanesh.
I was hoping to go after Brenda because she sits on the board and probably has some good ideas. As a new candidate to this, I'm not familiar with the goings on of the Comox Regional Hospital Board. I know it's part of the responsibilities, and some directors do sit on that. Obviously, healthcare in a rural place is important to us all, and I think we hear nationally that it's a challenge to keep nurses and doctors on Cortez. It's a constant challenge of how do we house doctors as they rotate in, because we don't have a permanent doctor here. Healthcare is a human right, and I'm proud to live in a country that provides health care to all of its citizens in a more or less equal way. I think there's lots of room to improve, but I think we can all agree here that the Strathcona Regional District is one of the best places in the world to live, and I think it's our job to showcase that, and that's going to support bringing in the staffing that we need, and just keeping the conversations going. Healthcare is so complicated; it's different for everybody, whether you're a young family or you're an older person, and people's needs are different. And the important thing is that we're listening and responding as a democratically elected government, and meeting the needs of the people that we serve.
Thank you so much. And candidate Wally.
Yes, hospital services, I've sat on that board for the last 14 years, and in my opinion, the greatest problem is the Island Health, VHA. For example, they promised us that we would have a fully functioning laboratory in the Campbell River Hospital, which we had for a very short time, and now they're shipping all those samples down to Victoria. Very slow return, very expensive, and our role as a hospital board basically is on capital expenditures. We pay 40%. So in services, we don't really have much influence, but our role as a board, as a hospital board, is to advocate directly with the provincial government to keep VHA, to fulfill the promises that they made, and deliver the services that we have contracted for. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Dahl.
All right, remember to unmute. Very much like Mark, I'm new to this, never sat on that board. There's something that the advocacy that the community played in the construction of the hospitals to get two different hospitals, one in Campbell River and one in Courtenay, shows kind of the power that community has when they advocate for the interests of the citizens. And I think that's an example of what we need to continue to do. The issue is always around medical professionals and keeping them. We can take examples that have in charge themselves, and when they organize around making sure and recruiting their own doctors or their own nurses instead of letting it happen just at a provincial level, there's communities like that, like I believe it's Nelson, that has done an amazing job. That every doctor position is filled. On Quadra Island currently, I don't have a family doctor, for example, because we lost her a couple of years ago, and hopeful that we have one coming in the spring. But a lot of this comes down to again to that housing issue, and we need to continue to advocate for better healthcare, but this is a provincial issue. And on the capital things, I think we are incredibly lucky to have the hospitals that we have. They're beautiful, and I know I've made use of it since I've been here.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Lee.
Thank you. In 2005, I was the hospital board chair, and I advocated for a new hospital, went to Penticton, talked to government representatives, did presentations to them about our needs for the two hospitals. In 2008, I put forward motions to the board that our board would not support a one hospital model. We wanted the two hospitals, and we wanted them with as many services as we could get into them. So the local taxpayers paid the capital cost to build the hospital in Campbell River and in the Comox Valley. And we deserve to have the services that we were promised when we built those facilities. Pathology has left us. We were promised dialysis. We were promised mental health and addiction services in Campbell River, and none of those services stayed with us. They keep eroding our services and moving them. And the hospital board people need to stand up and draw the line and say, look, these facilities were built by us. We've paid for them now almost fully. They're all paid off. And we want our services to come back to those hospitals, because we can't retain doctors if they don't have pathology services, if they can't deal with a patient whom they found suspected cancer and they can't get a pathology
Thank you,
result
Candidate
within
Lee.
a week. We need to have better services to support the doctors in the hospitals.
Thank you,
And I've had
Candidate
to
Lee.
fight for that for a while.
You've been there for 20 years. Why did you let it happen?
Candidate Mawhinney.
Hi, I am slightly in the same boat as Mark and Mark because I don't have a lot of knowledge about the hospital board's, the Comox Strathcona Hospital Board's role in the Campbell River Hospital. But I was really appreciative to hear the strong advocacy that Brenda has done to get us our own hospital in Campbell River, and I'm excited to work to promote and advocate for proper pathology and proper services in the Campbell River Hospital. It's really great to hear that that is an ongoing battle that we can still fight. I think when thinking about the role that the Comox Strathcona Board can play, I've been noticing that the mayor of Port McNeill has been on a board where she is advocating for retention and recruitment within their own community to solve the primary health crisis. And I would lean on that model as well. And I think that recruitment and retention locally is very important, because then we're going to have folks that want to live here in an ongoing basis and continue to work in our healthcare services. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question. If you are successful and are in fact elected, what would be your top 3 priorities and which one would you begin with? Candidate Vanesh.
Thank you. My top 3 priorities it would be housing, ecosystem protection / climate change, and sustainable business development, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. Those are the issues that I'm hearing are important to Cortez and I think also affecting the whole region. And I think with all these issues, there's connection between them. Economic development and housing, truth and reconciliation, and mental health and community well-being. There's a lot of potential to make change here, and I'm seeing a lot of common ground. And we are living in a time in the world where, we keep hearing the word crisis: healthcare, housing, climate. We're in a challenging time, and it requires political leadership that are willing to work together, look past our differences, and step up and make the bold, positive changes that we need and that the future generations in front of us need.
Thank you, Candidate Vanesh. Candidate Wally.
I'll just mention 2 major issues that are coming along. Right after the election, we go into our budget cycle for the next year. This is critically important for all electoral areas. And as always, I will do my best to make sure that our taxes are as low as possible in Area A. And I believe our taxes are the lowest of all the 4 electoral areas, and I'll keep it that way. The second thing is that we have been talking about this high-speed internet coming into all of electoral area for some time now, but it hasn't quite arrived yet. It's on the cusp of coming. So that will be a top priority to make sure we have that before winter. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Dahl?
Thank you. In terms of top 3 priorities, the number 1 priority that I'm focusing on is a really big project for Quadra, but it kind of underneath it takes into account every other idea I could possibly have. And that's about helping Quadra organize itself a little bit more as a community. So currently we have the regional director model, and we have really put a lot of our energy and faith into Jim to kind of take care of all things for us over the last 34 years. And I think he worked pretty hard to live up to that. But it's a pretty impossible job for one person to do. And I think for either Robin or I, if we step into this, it's going to be increasingly or even more difficult without that 34 years of background to do it. The regional director is going to need some help to develop the vision and take on the challenges that are coming. And then what I'm proposing is that we get together and we do something that is present on all over the place on the coast. Denman Island has it. Hornby has it with Hurrah, Denman Island Residents Association, Hurrah, or Hornby Island Residents and Ratepayers Association. Right here in Area C, we've got the SNACA or Surgeon Narrows Community Association. I know that Cortez toyed with the idea right before the pandemic, but I think it got sidetracked by the pandemic. And that's creating a body, an organized nonprofit for the citizens to kind of work in parallel and be a voice for the citizens, but also work in parallel with the regional director to take on some of these larger challenges that are coming.
Thank you, Candidate Dahl. Candidate Lee, what would your top 3 priorities be if elected, and which one would you begin with?
You're muted there, Brenda.
My first priority would be to democratize the regional district so that we can re-engage the community through public meetings and public input, because the pandemic really took away people's desire to go out in public and to mix and discuss things in person. And I think that left things a lot up to staff to make recommendations without enough public input. So we need to have the staff and the public work together in a process that really gets their opinions to the board table. And the other thing that we need to do, I want to continue to pursue improvements to our property services, like our water, transit, emergency services, etc. I am working on several initiatives, but I'd like to continue and to finish those. And that would be my main priority. And also climate change. We need to look at how we can mitigate the effects of climate change, because we're starting to feel them. We're very lucky we didn't have any wildfires this summer on Vancouver Island. We very well still could. It's so dry, and our water tables are going down all the time. We need to find a way to not just
thank you, Candidate Lee.
Climate change. We have to help it by planting trees wherever we can.
Thank you, Candidate Lee. Candidate Mawhinney.
Hi. I think the question was, if I'm successful, what are my top 3 priorities?
And which one would you start with?
And which one would I start with? In my communications that I've had with many Area C residents, I have realized that the top 3 issues are community engagement, housing, and rural emergency services. And I have really realized how circular and connected those 3 things are. So I feel really strongly that once we start working on one, we will work on all 3. For example, we need to work on housing. Obviously, that is of critical importance to our community. And to find ways of being aligned as a community and options which are suitable to our community, we are going to need to engage in a lot more community engagement. I have a sort of a 3-prong approach that I believe for this community engagement piece, I'm interested in starting a community advisory council, which has members from various neighborhoods, as well as interest groups like business, silviculture, tourism, etc. And I would like to be able to have them weigh in with me and provide their input to me as a director when I am working on facing decisions. As well, I'm interested in having focused community meetings and open houses because I feel that there's a broad spectrum of people that I'm interested in engaging with. And as well,
Thank you,
for folks that
candidate
live at the end of a long road.
Thank you, candidate Mawini. And candidate Rice.
If I'm elected, the 3 strategies that I would have, or the 3 projects, would be: first, let's get the water meters installed and let's get that over with. The next thing that I'd like to do is get back to community planning. We've not had community planning updates for 27 years, so we need to get back to the basics. The last thing that I would do is improve relationships with our First Nations people that are in our area and ensure that we have a respectful relationship going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, and this is directed to candidate Wally first. Do you feel the district areas need to address climate change? And if so, what are some of your ideas to help your citizens make an impact? Candidate Wally.
First of all, let me just say that having been in the silviculture for 30 years, that I planted probably 250,000 trees at least every year. Our economy is supported to a large extent by forestry, by logging, and every area that we log, we replant. And actually, we're a net carbon credit producer. So I think in Area A, perhaps we're a little unique here. We don't have a real carbon problem. We're probably on the other side of the fence where we're helping out all those areas that do by all those carbon credits we have from all those forests that are so vibrant in our area.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Dahl, do you think climate change is an issue in your area, and what would you do to help your citizens make an impact?
Thank you. Now, climate change is more than an issue. We are in a climate crisis, and that means that we'll add it onto the long list of crises we're talking about tonight. But yeah, we are dealing with a crisis. We're not going to fix climate change on a local level in Area C or even in the regional district, but we do need to make decisions that are always focused and based on the fact that we are in a climate crisis and the need to decarbonize and sequester carbon. And on a regenerative farm, that's our lifestyle. That's what we do every day. How we govern our animals, how we operate the farm is based on sequestering as many molecules of carbon as we can. From an Area C perspective, we need to look at not necessarily changing it, but also how do we mitigate against it. We have to take a look and plan for possible water table changes. We need to plan for forest fire on the island. This island has been wiped out before by a forest fire, so it's possible that does again. We need to have engaged community conversations on these type of issues. We need to take a look at our infrastructure and be ready to plan for rising seas and look at what we need to adapt to deal with what the IPCC report is telling us about rising seas. So those are some of the basic things that we can take a look at. The list is kind of endless, but it again is going to require all the brains of this community to come together, and we really just take this conversation and have it in long form sentences.
Thank you, Candidate Dahl. Candidate Lee. Candidate Lee, you're muted.
Thank you. I agree with candidate Wally that one of the best ways to help the atmosphere is to continue with our forest-based economy to maintain our forested areas. Trees do capture carbon and mitigate flooding and landslides, and they do provide a mitigating effect on the climate. We can't keep allowing our Vancouver Island to become a desert and to become so dry. On the planning level, we put in floodplain regulations so that people have to build up higher than what we expect sea level rise is going to be if they're near the ocean. We've looked at systems that we've upgraded heat recovery at Strathcona Gardens to save energy. We've got, we're selling methane gas from our landfills so that it can be converted into natural gas. Things like that are going to help. But I think the trees are very significant because we know how to grow trees on Vancouver Island and they are carbon sinks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candidate Lee. Candidate Mawhinney.
Thank you. I think when we are talking about addressing climate change, what we also need to really think about is addressing climate resilience. And as an area director working with the Strathcona Regional District, we have quite a few pieces that we need to focus on. Emergency preparedness is definitely one of those. It's great to know that there are so many neighborhood emergency preparedness organizations already happening on Quadra Island and further abroad. I believe that we need to support and enhance the outer islands and the outer community fire brigades. I think that when we are talking about climate change and climate resilience, we need to think about active transportation and having functional lanes on our roads which can accommodate bicyclers and runners and walkers and rollers and cyclists of any type. We are working towards a more carbon neutral community. I believe that we need to research and support with the groups on Quadra who are already doing the research to learn more about Quadra Island's aquifers so that we can make decisions which are based on sound information and not knowledge and not a lack of knowledge and fear. And I also believe that here on Quadra Island, we have great organizations that are doing a lot of really positive work to support climate resilience and climate change. Sorry, not to support climate change, to support climate resilience and work on climate change initiatives.
Thank you.
Is a group called
Thank you, Candidate Mawhinney. Thank you. Candidate Rice.
I do believe that we do have an issue with climate change, and it is going to take a lot of work to address it. I think the ways that we can look at it is, again, looking at transportation, looking at cycling, mass transit. Do we all need to get into our cars every day? Think of another way to get around. I think those would be key. I agree with the aspect of having trees. We do need to have trees in our community. They provide far more than just, environmental things, but those are important. We also have to take a look at our watersheds and make sure that we're managing our watersheds. We have to manage all of those resources carefully. The other thing that I would like to mention in terms of climate change is that it's evolving. So we need to have government that can evolve with it. And what I mean by that is, don't stop looking at the facts. Continue to go out there and explore options. Bring in as many people as you need to and sit down and have candid conversations. That is the only way that everybody is going to stay abreast of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Rice.
Make plastic easily recyclable.
Candidate Vanesh.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. I think there's a lot of people who would agree that climate change is one of the defining issues of our generation. The science is clear. We're already seeing across the globe the devastating effects that are going to grow, and it's scary. So there's two sides to it. Two sides of it for me. One is mitigation. How can we be prepared for, in our communities for increased risks of fire, increased risk of drought? What are the things we can do to keep our communities safe and prepared? And then secondly, what can we do to contribute to decreasing our carbon footprint? What are the examples that the Strathcona Regional District can make that show other places that environmental sustainability and decreasing our carbon footprint does not have to be an economic breakdown, and that the new world is calling for a decarbonized economy that works for everybody. And there's lots of great examples of things that we're already doing, and we need to step it up. It's a question of us advocating provincial and federal government to stop giving subsidies to carbon producers. At the very least, that's an easy place to start that we can advocate for. It's looking at the way we transport. It's about supporting local food initiatives. If food can get grown 2 kilometers from where you live, that's the lowest carbon footprint food you can have. And ultimately, it's a shared responsibility here.
Thank you, candidate Vanesh. Thank you.
And this government. Thank you.
The next question, we will start with candidate Dahl. This is the last of the questions before we move to the candidate question portion of the evening. So this question, a growing number of citizens are wanting alternative transportation. What would your approach be to increase transportation choices? Candidate Dahl.
All right, it's fun going first. You're going to have time to think. So, a couple of things that come to mind. So, people often talk on this island about the idea of having an electric bus or something along those lines. And I think that that's something that's eminently possible, but not something that a director is going to be able to wave a magic wand and make happen. When communities get organized, it's amazing what they can do. I say often that one person, a director coming together to try and implement a plan of alternate transportation is not really effective. But if you have an organized group of community citizens that are working to a common goal, the amount of grant money and the power of that larger group and that collective voice is way beyond what a single elected representative can do. With some of the things that we have is we have a ferry, obviously, to Campbell River, and looking at what are ways that we can reduce people's need to take their own private vehicle onto the ferry. So there's all sorts of creative things that we can take a look at. Is there a possibility of bringing car share to the other side, having overnight parking, working with the regional district and city of Campbell River to find places for Quadra Islanders to be able to park their cars so they aren't consistently having to transport a vehicle back and forth when it could just be 2 feet. Increasing bike lanes on the island, getting that electric bikes are becoming more and more popular by the day. But my daughter had a wipeout just coming off of our driveway.
Thank you, candidate Dahl. Thank you, candidate Dahl. Candidate Lee.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yes, with an increased number of citizens wanting additional transportation options, how would you go about offering them new transportation options?
Okay, I just wrote to a advocacy group for cycling and walking, and there is possibilities that we can continue to link our park trails so that people can get around on bicycles. And at one time we could ride all the way from Stories Beach to Willow Point on the old Waterline Trail. And if we could establish that by getting a right-of-way agreement with the landowner, we might be able to connect that to Beaver Lodge and be able to ride bikes and whatnot all the way to Campbell River. Those things would help for transportation networks. Also requesting that MOTI grant our area some leeway to widen the shoulders on the road so that people can more safely ride along the highway on bicycle and e-bikes. That would be helpful, maintaining the shoulders so that they're wider and safer for people. And the transit system could be much more effective if it moved into the neighborhoods rather than just going straight down the highway and back. Buses should go where the people are. People shouldn't have to run, a mile to the bus. So I would like to see that happen. So those are some of them.
Okay,
I would
thank you so much. Thank you, Candidate Lee. Candidate Mawhinney.
Hi, yeah, so alternative transportation. When I think of alternative transportation, I think about Quadra Island's need for crosswalks. I think about the car stop program that we had on Quadra Island for a number of years, and which would be really great benefit to reinvigorate that. I agree that improved active transportation routes are a very important and critical role that we need to consider, including trails. We have a great one that's being built that's connecting some roads right now on Quadra Island, but wide active transportation lanes will improve people's consideration of riding their bike or walking to the ferry instead of driving their car. I also believe that Quadra Island would benefit from an electric car charging station. That's something that we don't have here. And I would also like to point out that something that I'm very focused on working on is aligning the Campbell River bus schedule with BC ferries, so that when folks walk off the ferry, they don't have to wait 50 minutes for a bus.
Okay, thank you so much, Candidate Mawhinney. Candidate Rice.
Thank you for the question. I also got the same email as Candidate Lee. And when I look at Area D, I see a real problem in terms of alternate transportation. The first thing that I've noticed through my research preparing for this is that we haven't had a traffic study done for many, many years. And when I take a look at the highway, how does a cyclist safely bike? How does a pedestrian safely walk? When I take a look at the roads in Area D, I see fast traffic, fast moving traffic, no shoulders, nowhere to go to. So I'm all for cycling. I'm all for walking. I'm all for, bus routes and extra transportation. But we need to also get back and do some planning for Area D to kind of figure out what is that going to look like at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Candidate Vanesh.
I had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time working on politics in Vancouver, and I think one of the important things to do as local governments is to look at other places, what's working in other places, what isn't working in other places. At 15 years ago, the idea of putting in a dedicated bike lane or making bike lanes was seen as quite very, very controversial. But one of the things I've learned is if you build safe alternative transportation systems for folks, they'll get used. Whether that's dedicated bike lanes, whether that's trails off of roads. It's about signage on Cortez. On Cortez, sometimes we get tourists come and they're biking 5 wide on the road, thinking they're in this like empty country road, and it's unsafe for locals, and it's unsafe for the bicyclists themselves. It's about education. It's about giving people incentive to step outside of their vehicles and travel in different ways. And one of the big issues on Cortez is we've got a 2-ferry wait to get to the hospitals for seniors. And one of the things I'd like to see is us advocate to BC Ferries to provide a reservation system for older folks on Cortez, so they can have a guaranteed access to be able to make sure that they make their medical appointments and their appointments in town that allow them to live here longer and make the community better for all of us.
Thank you, Candidate Vanesh. Candidate Wally.
In contrast to Quadra, Cortez, Area D, Area A's population is spread from Johnson Straits over to the Pacific Ocean, Cayucot. In Sayward Valley, for example, we have 225 taxpayers. To expect that we can run a bus line with that is unrealistic. And as much as it might be nice to dream about having bus lines, that's not going to happen here. So our main supply center is Campbell River for most things. However, as the local area is able to work on food security, it will perhaps diminish the need to drive as frequently to town. And I think that'll be a benefit. But some of the things that are valid for the more centralized populations aren't as valid for Area A.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, that brings to the close the first portion of the evening, and the next portion is each candidate is able to ask a question of another candidate of their choosing. So the first candidate who gets to ask the question is Candidate Lee. Candidate Lee, who would you like to ask your question of, and what is your question? You need to unmute yourself.
I've heard some pretty damning statements from Director Rice about how Area D is run. I don't think he's aware that the official community plan is a living document. Even though it was adopted many years ago, it is a great document and it has been amended at least 22 times. It's alive and it's well, and we're changing our community gradually. I believe in evolution rather than revolution. So people in Area D love Area D the way it is. They don't want change. I'd like to know what Mr. Rice believes should change in Area D. What does he have as a platform rather than just taking pot shots at me? What does he believe in for Area D as far as change or
Okay.
change direction?
Thank you for the question. Candidate Rice?
Thank you for the question. I don't think I can answer that in 90 seconds. I have posted all the information on my website. There's a lot of things that I would like to do for the community. You just have to go and take a look at my website. It's all there. Thank you.
Could you maybe give us the top 3 things?
Top 3 things would be doing water meters, water infrastructure, going back to the community planning, updating our OCP with something that is current, not something from 1996. Those are the top 3 items that I have.
Okay, thank you,
you.
Candidate Rice. Candidate Lee, Candidate Lee, do you have a follow-up question?
Well, the OCP is up to date right now. Every time we have an amendment to the OCP, we take it to public hearing, we consider the issues, and we either adopt it or not into our new community plan. It is a living document. There's no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So
People
do
in
you have
Area
a
D love it
question?
here the way it is, and they don't trust candidates who say they're for wholesale change.
Candidate Lee, what is your follow-up question?
Well, I'd like to know, rather than, because I'm not going to his website, I'd like to know what he means by change. What are the changes that he proposes to Area D?
So Candidate Rice, maybe you could talk specifically about the OCP.
Okay. The change that I would like to bring to Area D is that the community feels left out. So what I would like to do is have public hearings. Let's bring the community back in on our planning, just like we tried to do in 2016, 2017. There was a draft. What happened to that draft? So it's time to bring that back to the community. The community wants to be involved. We don't want to be told, we want to be involved.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Candidate Mawhinney, you now have the opportunity to ask a question of another candidate. What is your question and who is it for?
Hi, my question is for Brenda Lee. As in other rural and remote BC locations, Quadra Island's rural emergency health services are struggling. On Quadra, often there are several days a month with a complete absence of paramedic coverage or only one paramedic available, and volunteer firefighters are acting as drivers. Mayors from some rural communities, including Port McNeill, are banding together to raise a stronger voice at the provincial level regarding their rural primary healthcare system. Part of the role of Electoral Area Director is advocacy. So my question is to Brenda Lee, what are your thoughts on collaborative advocacy? And could you share an example that you have experienced during your time as a director?
Thank you, Robin. One of the most recent things that I have been doing is advocating for the outer islands and remote communities to get healthcare grants from our hospital board. So that was, I moved to increase the grant amounts for the clinics and hospitals from $5,000 to $10,000 in this year's budget, and that was passed. And now we're adding some more healthcare facilities in First Nations and other remote communities onto our list of named health facilities under the Health Act, because that is the only way we're allowed to fund capital improvements to our health services, is by having them named in the Health Act. And we're in the process of doing that now. So yes, I've helped the rural communities quite a bit.
Thank you. And candidate Mawhinney, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. Brenda Lee, I'm wondering if you have suggestions on how the electoral area directors could harness collaborative advocacy in the case of the issues that we are facing with rural emergency health services.
Well, I think it would be through advocacy by bringing motions to the board to go to the ABICC and UBCM to get them to pressure the provincial government to improve the paramedic services and improve the emergency health services to remote communities. I think it's not just one voice or one regional district that can make the change. It has to be province-wide. And even then, sometimes the province doesn't respond to 90% of the resolutions from UBCM and ABICC, but we still have a voice there and we can still try. So I think that's one route to go. And that would be my suggestion, is just we would be able to advocate, but we have no jurisdiction over those operations. Operationally, but we could advocate. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Candidate Rice, you now can ask a question. What would it be and who is it for?
My question is to candidate Lee. How do you view your relationship with the First Nations village being built in Area D?
I was meeting with the Clawitsis prior to the reserve being granted by the Federal Indigenous Affairs Ministry. I wrote and communicated the concerns of Area D residents regarding how the bylaws on the Clawitsis Reserve would harmonize with Area D bylaws, because we're right next door. And I received absolutely, and I did put a lot of pressure on the Federal Indigenous Affairs Ministry to answer those questions on behalf of Area D, and they did not. They did not respond, and they are simply, proceeding with what their plans are without consultation with us. And you can call, you can try, but it is very difficult to have any response back. So that's where it's at right now. I've had, I would say, 4 or 5 meetings with Clawitsis before the reserve was established, and raised these concerns with them. So it's not like I haven't laid them out.
Candidate Rice, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. What benefits do you see with the First Nations village being built in our community?
I would think that there likely are benefits, and they just need to be communicated. I think that people are people. Everybody has to have a place to live. Everybody has to have a place to bring their people together, and that's what they're aiming to do. And they're aiming to correct a wrong that was done over 100 years ago, when the Indian Affairs Department created 11 different reserves in various locations that were too small to house their whole band, and they're looking to try to bring their band back together. So I just wish that it could be a little more collaborative, but it hasn't been so far in the development. And when I call our planners to ask them, well, What about the noise bylaw? Does that apply? No, it doesn't apply. Can't apply any Area D laws to the First Nation Reserve. And yet, you know, Area D people are suffering the consequences of having the development go all summer long, making lots of heavy noise and industrial noise, and nobody is responding at the reserve. So
Thank
it's a
you.
problem. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Candidate Lee. Candidate Vanesh, what is your question and who is it for?
I'm going to ask Sarah Fowler a question. I know she just joined and
Yes.
must have finished just her other meeting. Sarah, what's, you know, the Strathcona Regional District is 22,000 kilometers big. It's a wide geographical area, this mix of urban and rural, very rural compared to lots of other places. What do you see are some of the biggest challenges that we face here, and what's your plan? I just want to give someone else an opportunity to speak. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm really glad to speak about this because one of the things that came to our council table of Village of Tassus today was a rural health network, right? So again, it's like the issues of ambulance. I gave a talk today or this past week at the UBCM, and some of the input that was coming from small communities, as I'm the small community rep on the UBCM, is that when an ambulance leaves our town, like for instance, Tassus, and goes to Gold River and transfers a patient there, there's no other ambulance service available. And so there are having to have first responders from volunteer fire department respond to any calls that do come up. I think that rural health is like night and day to urban health. But I also can shine some light about the positives of, like, I have lived in Tassus for 12 years. I've had 2 children on the island since I moved here. I was able to drive myself to the hospital 2 weeks before my due date, to Comox and to Duncan. I have had good experiences with the rural health VHA operated services that we have here in the village of Tassus. There are, of course, things that need to be addressed, like having a loaner bus, a loaner ambulance, when their ambulance is already out of town with 1 patient. That means no one else can get sick, which is a challenge, right? I think
Thank you, Candidate Fowler.
Probably I'm up to time.
Yeah. Candidate Vanesh, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I do have a follow-up question. You know, looking at the larger regional district again, thinking about how, you know, we are diverse people here. We have different thoughts about, you know, what progress looks like and how to move forward together. Maybe speak to your philosophy of collaboration, or like, you know, of politics and community building.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I think that there is definitely a diverse reach in our area, like from even Brooks Peninsula to Sayward Valley. That's a huge geographical area, and that's just Area A, right? So I think that it's really important to understand that the needs of Cayucit residents are different than the needs of Sayward residents. And with respect to housing, because that's definitely the hot button topic of every jurisdiction everywhere. There's definitely, it's difficult to attract development to the end of the road. It costs 3 times more to pour a concrete foundation in Tassus than it would somewhere closer to the hub, so to speak. So whether it's medical services or, you know, I can say that there is affordable housing here in Tassus, but I also can say that it comes out of somewhere else. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Wally, who is your question for, and what is your question?
I have a question for Sarah Fowler. My question is, you have already been acclaimed as a representative at UBCM. You're currently a councillor in the village of Tassus. You are running for re-election in Tassus, which you might win. So my question is, why do you also In addition to all that, wanted to be the Electoral Area Director for Area A.
Thank you. I'm going to first say thank you to Director Wally for this question, because I know that I am offering myself to two offices. I also know that I will likely have to choose if I am elected to both. The personal reason for me to seek Area A electoral area is one of personal finances. The Area A director gets 16,000 plus dental, and in the village of Tassis, that is not the case. I have had some success being a municipal councillor in the village of Tassis. It is a huge honor for me to represent every small community in our province, but I also recognize that small communities and electoral areas suffer some of the same death by 1,000 cuts.
And candidate Wally, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Dahl, what is your question and who is it for?
My question is for the other Mark. And the question is, I think going forward with regional director or regional district, collaboration between areas and collaboration between everybody on the board is of utmost importance. So what areas do you see, Cortez is kind of our sister island. What areas and what opportunities do you see for common ground and for linkages between Quadra and Cortez?
Well, we drive across or bike across Quadra every time we get to Cortez. So definitely part of our community in a lot of ways. I think that's one of the bigger issues is how we get across, what that looks like as far as climate change and cars. What does it look like as potential doing some electric scooter stuff? How do we get people basically from Campbell River to the Cortez ferry in a way that's good for Quadra, in a way that's good for Cortez, makes sense for the people that are using it? And we know we're not going to get seniors on electric scooters, but we know that there's a lot of 20-year-olds that are going to be pumped to do that. And I think there's a lot of potential for us to work together in our tourism sectors, transportation, and just speaking to the wider district, housing. I think it's Quadra and Cortez. We do have some similarities that maybe other places don't, but we all are in this boat together. And I think working in the spirit of collaboration is the most important thing that we can do. Recognizing that we're not always going to agree with the person that's sitting beside us, and that's perfectly fine. But what we can do is move forward with the direction and flow of what the people are looking for, whether we always agree or not. So I'm excited to break down the walls of traditional politics and get people talking to each other, seeing the humanity in each other that we haven't seen before, or that we see less of. I'm looking to make this world a little less divided.
Thank you, candidate Vinesh.
Or unified. Thanks, Mark.
And now we actually get to go one more time around, starting with candidate Mawhinney. What is your question and who is it for? Candidate Mawhinney?
I wasn't really prepared with a second question at this moment, so can we skip past me and come back in a minute when I've given it some thought?
Sure. Candidate Rice, who is your question for and what would it be?
My question is for candidate Dahl. If we could have one partnership with the 4 electoral directors, who would be that partner?
Sorry, could you repeat that for me again, please?
If we were only able to have one partnership with the 4 electoral directors, who would be that partner?
That's an awesome question to get into a lot of trouble with. No, frankly, I don't want to play a game of Survivor and have to choose between anybody. I think collaboration wholesale is how we're going to move this regional district forward. We have some huge problems that are upcoming, some huge challenges that we're only going to be able to face if we all face them together.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Mawhinney, have you thought of a question? Candidate Mawhinney.
I'm still thinking.
Okay. Candidate Vinesh, what is your question and who would it be for?
So I have two questions here. Instead of doing a follow-up, I'd just like to ask Gerald and Brenda a question, because they're the ones that have been here for 10 years or 15 years or almost 30 years. What's your advice for new people that are entering politics? What do you think the biggest challenges is for new folks entering, and what's your advice to the newbies that are vying for positions here?
Okay, so candidate Lee, if you could answer that question first, and then candidate Wally.
My advice would be not to think that as an elected person that you're the king of that area. You are a part of a board, and anybody who thinks that they have the magic wand and they can make things happen just for their area without working with the whole board and coming to democratic decisions, they'll find out that that's how it is, that nobody has unilateral power on the board. And, you know, when a new candidate, which I've heard my opposition say, yeah, I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll do the other thing. Well, no, you won't, because you have to work with all of us on the board. We all have to work together, and we all have to support each other, and understand each other. So I think that's the first lesson to be learned is we have to collaborate. We have to come up with good democratic decisions at the board table.
Thank you. Candidate Wally.
Thank you. I would mention two things. One, you will be approached to enter joint services with other entities, and I won't mention any names here, but never enter a service where you do not have at least an equal vote, or you will be outvoted and your budget will be set by somebody else, and you cannot get out of a service once you get into it. That's point number one. Point number two is your needs in your specific area will likely be very different than the other three electoral areas in many things. And you will find that if you are supportive of the other directors in their specific needs, they will reciprocally be supportive of what you need in your area. If you go as a Lone Ranger type thing, you will run into great difficulty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Wally, you have the next question. So who would you like to ask a question of, and what is it?
Well, actually, Mary Ruth, because electoral areas are never in competition with each other, I really don't have any questions for any of the other directors.
Okay. Candidate Dahl, what is your next question and who would it be for?
I'd like to state that Mark stole my question. So reforming,
I'm sorry.
I'll do the same concept to our two experienced directors here. What's your biggest hope for the next council?
Candidate Wally, you get to go first. What is your biggest hope for the next council?
I'm not sure. Could you enlarge on what you mean by next council? What council?
Well, after the election, what is your next hope? What is your biggest hope after the election for those that are elected?
Well, first of all, let me say there's an enormous learning curve once you're elected, and it can take sometimes 6 months or more even just to figure out how the whole budget process works and to understand your role in it and how you're going to budget your various services. So I would say that if you need help in that, talk to me or talk to Brenda, and if we're both elected, we'll be certainly glad to help you.
And candidate Lee, your answer?
Yes, I would be happy to help anyone who needs some advice. And I do have 30 years of experience on the regional boards. I still serve on the Comox Valley board. I just did a board meeting before I started this debate for Comox Valley. And I know how to do things. I know how to get motions on the table, how to defer them, the mechanism of local government and how it works. And I think you'll learn fast. You're all really smart. So I think all of you will learn on your own really fast. But if you ever need any help, I'm there.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you. Candidate Dahl, do you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you for your responses.
Okay. Candidate Lee, do you have a question, and who would it be for?
Not really. I hadn't thought of one.
Okay. All right.
Not
And
really. And I'm getting kind of burnt out because I've been going all day long with my other board meeting, and I have a board meeting tomorrow and a couple of committee meetings that I prepared for today as well. So I'm starting to fade.
okay, well, we are getting close to the end. So candidate Mawhinney, have you thought of a question?
I certainly have. This is a question for candidate Rice. And when I became the candidate, when I chose the candidacy path, it was really important to me to reach out and form connections with local First Nations on which Area C is planted. And I'm curious, candidate Rice, how the relationship building is and what sort of relationship building you have been undertaking during your candidacy path.
Thank you for that question. I've already had meetings with the village here in Area D. I've had those meetings back in the beginning of the year. I believe that I have a good working relationship with Councillor Thomas Smith. We communicate with email. He's open to having me ask him questions, and I do get responses from him. The word that I hear is that they're looking forward to having a director that can work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Rice. Candidate Mawhinney, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I don't. That's great. Thank you. I enjoyed meeting with Councillor Thomas Smith as well.
Okay. What I would like to do is, because Sarah was not able to join us until quite late, Sarah, do you have, I'll put the next question to you. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask any of the candidates, and who would it be and what would the question be?
The question that is really coming to mind for me is about how we've prioritized our joy during this last 4 years of our last term, or for other people who weren't already elected, for surviving the pandemic, right? Because I do feel like it was a lot longer than 4 years for me. I feel like there was definitely a lot of challenges with so who this question can go to is whoever wants to answer it, because it's a warm, fuzzy question. I want people to protect themselves in this, in this race as it is. I really value all the contributions that we give, whether that's through service in our communities, through serving, and in the other ways that we do that.
So what is the question?
The question is about how have you prioritized joy during the pandemic?
Okay. How do you prioritize joy during the pandemic? And now that we're heading out the other end of it, how do you prioritize joy then and now? Who is up next? Candidate Rice, you're next. You answer first.
Good question. I have to think about it for a minute. I think that the best way to have joy, coming in and going out was, first of all, keeping your feet grounded when going in, making sure that you were factually informed, those kinds of things. Going out, I believe what's really important is to understand that we're seeing the pandemic disappear a little bit. So let's try and get back to being normal. Let's try to make it all normal. And I think those are important. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Vanesh, how do you capture and experience your joy?
I'm a big sailor, so getting out to nature, getting out on the boat, sailing is like one of the best things as far as my personal joy and well-being. It's like, I love slow boating. It's the socialness, camping, being out in nature. We live in the most beautiful place on earth. I just feel so grateful to do that, and that helps me a lot. I'll pass it on to the next.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wally.
Myself and another rancher built 40 kilometers of trail from the Sayward Valley to Brewster Lake near Campbell River. I love to ride my horse, and anything out in nature is absolutely joyful for me.
Thank you. Councillor Dahl.
Kind of how we got through the pandemic was with family. We brought my parents onto the farm, so we now have a 3-generation farm, and that has brought everybody a lot of joy. And whenever I do get feeling a level of stress, I find standing out in the sheep paddock and just watching sheep eat is pretty joyful as well.
Okay. Councillor Lee.
My joy are my 2 grandkids, and every time I see them, and they're big horse people too. They're my granddaughter just turned 5 yesterday, and a 2-year-old grandson, and I love seeing them all through the pandemic on FaceTime, and that kept me going. I felt after the pandemic, my joy has been getting out campaigning and talking to people. But if anybody thinks that the pandemic is done, I went to 2 homes where they did have COVID, and luckily I heard them talking about it in their yard, and I just put my pamphlet on their fence post because I didn't want to go near. But the virus is still circulating out there, and it still isn't totally safe out there. So we do have to be a little careful. But I do feel good that I'm able to communicate with people again and see familiar faces. It's wonderful. And being in politics as long as I have, I know almost everybody, and I know their dog's name. So yeah, I can walk up to any door and know that that dog is not probably going to attack me because he knows me.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And now we have come to the end. So now we're going to do the closing statements, and we will start with candidate Vanesh. Your 90-second closing statement, please.
My 90-second closing statement. Well, I have the good fortune of not having to run in an election and race against somebody. And my message really is speaking to the larger district. Get out there and vote. Democracy is so important. Typically, we're not going to get much more than 50% of people voting. And as politics is obviously so challenging, it can be a lifesaver. The decisions that we make as leaders in our communities, the hard ones, the easy ones, the fun ones, the difficult ones, they have a significant impact on people. And I want to just encourage people to get involved, meet their candidates more, contact them directly, encourage your friends to get out and vote. I really believe in the Strathcona Regional District's ability to be an example in the world, set an example for how politics can be done, set an example for how we deal with the crises and the challenges of the world today. And I'm highly optimistic, which is easy to say for somebody who's just stepped into politics, but I am optimistic with the people that have stepped up in this district, and I'm optimistic to the leadership in this district, of the people that are running the businesses and running the hospitals and teaching our kids and fixing our roads. And I have a lot of excitement for the potential in this district, and I hope everyone gets involved and plays a role in democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Vinesh. Candidate Wally, your closing statement, please.
In closing, I'd like to say that it is important that all residents of Electoral Area A come out and vote on October the 15th. In the Sayward Valley, voting takes place from 8 to 8 p.m. and I think that's true everywhere. In Sayward Valley, it's at the Heritage Hall. And I hope everyone will support me for re-election as your director so that we can keep all those parts of Area A that do not already have community plans free from any land use bylaws, building permits, inspections, business licenses, and every other restriction. The local government uses to control how we can enjoy our own property. Now, Area A is the only electoral area in the Strathcona Regional District where most of our population is not controlled by land use bylaws. So if you vote for me, I will ensure that none of those things ever happen. In addition, I'll continue to work hard to keep your property taxes as low as possible, and compared to every other electoral area in our area, they are already the lowest and are going to stay that way. I'm very vigilant about how our tax dollars are spent, and I will make sure that nothing is wasted on frivolous projects. Having lived in this area for 45 years, I believe I know what my constituents want. I have the political experience to be able to make sure it happens. And if anyone has any concerns or questions about anything related to Area A local government, please do not hesitate to contact me. My contact information is on the SRD website. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Wally. Candidate Dahl, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. I did have a closing statement written out, but I don't think I'm going to read it. I just wanted to maybe take a moment and thank the Campbell River Chamber of Commerce, the Tidemark, and Campbell River Mirror for putting this event together. I've enjoyed it. I'd like to thank all the area directors who participated tonight. I think I'm really optimistic to what this group of people, whoever gets elected, can do for the people that we represent, and build some new bridges and take on the challenges that are coming our way, from climate change and food security to everything that we talked about tonight. So I really enjoyed myself this evening. Thanks for everybody's hard work putting this together, and congratulations to everybody who stepped up. Putting your name on a ballot isn't easy, and thank you everybody here for doing it.
Thank you, Candidate Dahl. Candidate Fowler, your closing statement.
I'm going to use my closing statement to mirror or echo what Brenda was saying about the pandemic not being over. Thank you for saying that, Brenda. I've heard just today in the Village of Tassus Council meeting that someone who was representative from New Denver, they sent their council to the UBCM in Whistler. We're talking about rural health. We're talking about underserved areas. And he said that there was sort of a, I got the COVID from the conference. So I will be doing a test shortly. I feel fine, and I did a lot of talking to people. I figured I've lost my voice from talking to people, but I also see how with no mandates and how we're coming back to hugs and handshakes, I just want everyone to be safe out there. So thanks so much for saying that. And also, I'm happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Candidate Fowler. Candidate Lee, your closing statement, please.
I would just like to say that I'm very positive in my outlook on governing and working with other people. I'm one of the easiest people to get along with, as long as I'm not backed into a corner about my area where I need to defend them. I stand on my record as one of the most effective leaders in our region, and I've been reelected 9 times already, which tells you that people don't think I'm doing that bad a job. If you want a director you can count on and work for your interests in Area D, I'm the one. If you want somebody who likes to work with other directors and communicate with them, I'm the one. I don't have all the answers. I don't see everything as black and white. I'm willing to listen and to actually change my own direction if I hear from the people that the direction is strong enough to warrant a change. But I'm not in favor of wholesale change to our area, because people who live in Area D love Area D the way it is. They don't want it to change dramatically. And I'm sure all the other electoral areas feel the same way about where they live. So that's where I stand. So if you want a director you can count on, vote for Brenda Lee for Area D.
Thank you. Councillor Mawhinney, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. I'm running for regional director because local politics has great potential for community activism. I'm prepared to take on challenges and speak up. I want decisions centered on island values which include long-term sustainability, the strength of our community, respect for First Nations, and the rural nature that we all love. I want to fight for a livable future. The role of regional director is more than a job. It's public service and it's community service. It requires someone with dedication and soul to tackle the tough issues that we face, and I am up for the challenge. On October 15th, I'd love it if everyone went and voted, and if you'd like to vote for me, I'd be pretty happy. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, Candidate Rice, your closing statement, please.
I would be remiss not to acknowledge that the many years of commitment and work that that the long-standing director has done for the community. But I also know that it's time for a change. I believe our community is looking for a candidate that has a clean slate, that can bring new energy, new ideas, new perspective, and a new way of getting things done, while still maintaining all of the values that define our community. I hope that I've shown this evening that I'm adaptable and ready to take on that challenge. I believe it's time to give voice to all of the residents of our community and make decisions that are in the best interest of everyone's future in Area D. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you to all of the candidates for the courage to let your names stand for our democracy. It takes an enormous amount of work to do what you are doing, and we thank you. On behalf of my co-hosts, the Campbell River Mirror and the Tidemark Theatre Society, and the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce, we would like to thank you for joining us this evening for the Electoral Area Directors Debate. Thank you, and have a great evening.
Thank you,
Good night,
Mary.
everyone.
Good night.
All right.
Appreciate being invited. Thanks.
Good night and thank you.